I suppose my first memories of Shinty are when I would have been about 4 or 5, because being brought up in Coole near Fort William, Shinty in the early 60s was about the only sport we had, and we were very lucky, I suppose, in a way that in 1964 Kilmallie won the Camanachd Cup for the first time, and that was the first time I ever went to a Camanachd Cup match, a cup final. I was only 8 at the time and my father took me there, so I suppose that's where I got the bug of the big occasion of Shinty, just being at a final for the first time. But basically we used to spend all our waking hours out. We were living just beside Coole Primary School playground, which was a tar macadam surface, but there were a lot of Shinty players on the street. The Shearer family, Duncan Shearer, the footballer, his whole family were Kilmallie folk. His father played. There was a whole heap of other players, Jack Buchanan, who played in goals for Fort William. So we were out all the time, and we were lucky to have senior players who taught us the game. And one of the things I do remember is the first stick I got was from a relation of mine who played for Kilmallie, Neil MacLennan, and he gave me, it was a full-size Caman, which was bigger than me at the time, if you can envisage me being maybe 6, 7, 8. And the thing then was, sticks were so scarce and so expensive, you weren't allowed to cut it. And I always remember being told that you had to grow into the stick, you know, so you were running about with a stick that was really about a foot too long, and if you could play with it, it was a miracle. But you were so keen to look after it, there was no way you were going to cut 6 inches off it and then find you needed another one in another year, and you weren't going to get one. So there were no Xboxes, no computers, no iPads, nothing. It was a bouncing ball and a game, and that game was Shinty, and that's where we got it. And then I played it all through primary school, all through secondary school, carried on playing in university as well. But it was my formative years and my earliest memories are great memories. And I was born in a Kilmallie area. At the time, the dividing line between Fort William and Kilmallie was the river. I was born on the Kilmallie side of the river, but I never ever played for Kilmallie. I jumped ship and I went to play for Fort William juveniles when I was in school, and I don't think people in Kilmallie have ever forgiven me for that. Not that I would have given them much. Well, I think to be absolutely cynical and absolutely honest about it, Fort William had a good bunch of players at that time. There was a whole heap of good guys. Joe McMillan, George Mackay was the goalkeeper, Kenny Cameron, a very good forward at the time. We had a very good school team, and we won the McBain Cup on a number of occasions. And I think at that time, that was the age group that qualified you for things like the McTavish Cup and the W.J. Cameron, which are still going. And the key thing for me was Fort William offered me a game. I saw a better chance of winning more trophies with Fort William than I did with Kilmallie, and that's, you know, whether anyone else likes it or not, that's what I did. My best mates were playing for Fort William at the time, Joe Toll, Joe McMillan, people like that, Duncan Kelly, who are still around Fort William. Joe Toll sadly has died, obviously long time since, but they were my mates, and at the end of the day, when you're that age, these things certainly to me didn't come into consideration that much. Maybe regret it looking back and feel a bit of disloyalty about it, but that's the way it goes if you see the chance to win things, which was the important thing for us at that age. And we did win a lot of medals when we were at the juvenile age, and then, you know, I left Fort William, missed out on Fort William's probably best years, some of them, because I was at university, and I played a year for them when I came back from university, but I was living in Inverness, and it was too much, so then I played for Inverness. What happened was that when we were in university as a Gaelic speaker, we were very fortunate at the time that the BBC in Glasgow used to use students for various things like reading drama parts and taking part in various programs. And in some ways that was a very smart move by the BBC, because the Gaelic department was assessing where they would get their next set of employees. So we were lucky enough to be doing stuff during the school holidays, university holidays, and that helped pay the way through university as well. So that's where we kind of got the experience. And I was offered a job by the BBC when I was leaving university, but my parents at the time, I remember, advised me, and a few other people said, you'd be better to get your teaching certificate so you've got something to fall back on if you don't like the broadcasting. So I taught in Inverness, where I was involved with school shinty for a while. It was great for 4 years with the late John Willie Campbell in Inverness and Milburn Academy. So I got that kind of involvement as well. And then push came to shove. I had some changes in my personal circumstances where I thought a career change it came at the right time. I was offered another job at the BBC in '83, March '83. And that was when Radio Highland had been formed, first of all, in Inverness. It wasn't a Gaelic service, but it was beginning to head towards the Gaelic service, which was established in 1985, which was the formal start of Radio na Gael. But by then, I had been asked to commentate on my first live Shinty Cup final, and that was with the late, great David Francie, who was the top football commentator at the time, and he had never seen a Shinty match. And he took me to Wembley on the Wednesday before the game. We were down on a training course, and Scotland were playing England, so I went to Wembley, Charlie Nicholas and all that stuff, and he showed me how he would be working, and it all involved me keeping my pen on the name of the player who hit the ball. That's all he wanted me to do. And then he said, "When I touch your elbow, Sonny, you speak." That was the advice he gave me. And that's the way we got through the 1983 Camanachd Cup final between Lochaber and Kyles Athletic. And it was a fabulous match. And I've listened back to recordings of that, and nobody would ever know that David Francie had never seen a Shinty match in his life. He got through it. He just sailed through it. He was a complete professional. That was my first one. And it just went on from then. I worked with David Begg, Jock Brown, I think, Ian Anderson, Alistair Alexander. Most of the top football commentators got a shot at doing the Shinty. It was quite funny. The BBC used to send them. It was always like a good luck present at the end of the season. Go and do the Shinty. And they loved it. Alistair Alexander in particular. Great experience. And I've just gone on and done it then in wider terms in radio, reporting and the match coverage, and then of course it developed when the Gaelic service TV came on in 2008. We started doing live Gaelic commentaries as well, so it's been a fantastic experience. I do. I think they have to do more, otherwise they won't generate their own revenue streams, because at the end of the day, sponsorship depends on coverage and what they call eyeballs, the number of people looking at any given product. Now, I think the traditional means of watching Shinty, the free-to-air BBC type of coverage, is diminishing. At the worst, it's on a plateau, because BBC Alba, for example, has done 8 or 9 games for the last couple of seasons. I don't see that developing unless BBC Alba get an awful lot more cash. I don't see the new BBC Scotland channel doing more Shinty coverage either. If anything, they will probably do less because they have a limited budget, albeit it's much bigger than BBC Alba, but they still won't have the cash to develop it. So the answer lies somewhere else. The question is, where is that? And I think streaming of some kind has to be an option. Already the Camanachd has 1 match per week done on a YouTube basis where they put the games there. But whatever it is going to be, it needs people to do it. It needs less equipment, but you still need a couple of guys with a couple of cameras. 1 camera, I don't think is really adequate for Shinty because of the size of the pitch, if nothing else. So I think you need a minimum of 2 or 3 cameras, and that makes it 3 times the cost of 1 camera. It's not rocket science. And then if you want, how many games do you want? 5 games, 10 games? It's a simple sum, but you have to find the money. Well, what happens is that when you go to negotiate with any media broadcaster, you have parameters. You can go in and say, this is the minimum of what we want, whether it's 8 cameras, 10 cameras, or whatever. The broadcasters will probably turn around and say, that's too expensive. We can do it with maybe 6 or 8. What do you think? And they'll negotiate. There is a negotiation to be done, but there is a bare minimum beyond which I don't think it's worth going. If it drops below 3 or 4 cameras, I don't think you can cover it adequately. I think the compromise would be that they may have to look at doing some high quality, good traditional, if we can call it that, outside broadcast coverage, but certainly develop much more in terms of streamed games, whether these games are lower levels, cups, other finals, for example, the Ballymore, the Sutherland, the lower level matches, or different matches in the Women's League as well. These can be covered on a slightly lesser quality and resource level than the main games, but I think in terms of your gold standard games, the Camanachd Cup, the International, the Macaulay and the Celtic, I think they need to be treated in the more traditional way, and that unfortunately is expensive and it has to be fought for.